as the founder and CEO of Companion Medical. And tonight I was going to talk a little bit about what Companion Medical is, but maybe more importantly, why it is, where it came from, and some of the lessons learned along the way. So to start with that, I'll hopefully make this thing work. All right, again, my name is Sean Saint. I'm the founder and CEO, but obviously I did not start my career there. In fact, I started here at Cal Poly, mechanical engineer, computer science minor. Now, when I went here, I probably had never heard the word entrepreneur. If I had heard it, I probably didn't know what the hell it was. Entrepreneurs Club. In fact, we didn't have a lot of the entrepreneurial successes that we talk about now. Facebook, Uber, Twitter, even Google, I'm embarrassed to admit, only had a couple of employees when I graduated here about 20 years ago. So the world is a very different place from an entrepreneurial perspective. So I followed a more traditional path. Has this been working? No. Awesome. All right, hold on. No, that's not working either. This is going to get odd. All right. So I followed a more traditional path, right? I went to this company, ABE, thought it was a startup, had about 1,200 employees. Not much of a startup, but it pretty quickly sold to Medtronic. And at the time, it was the largest medical device sale of all time. Now, that didn't matter to me. I was too junior, but what it did allow me to do is kind of see how rare and how special those kinds of things can be and really get me interested in what you can do. So I moved on to a more legitimate startup, Dexcom. I had about 30 employees when I got there. This company is now on the Fortune 500 list. So this one worked out, right? No, not for me. Sold all my stock when it was like $1. Very painful lesson there about cashing out. Not one of the ones I'm talking about tonight, but feel free to ask me about it if you want to. But I did that because the entrepreneurial bug bit, right? And I left to go to found a company called Allure Medical, where I was employee number one. Allure Medical, we did brand new devices the world had never seen. We did clinical trials on those. We got them approved by the FDA, and the company failed. So that obviously didn't work out and sent me back into the more traditional startup world with a company called Tandem Diabetes Care, which was a developer of insulin pumps. I was the director of mechanical engineering and advanced technologies. This company is now worth about $5 billion. So this one worked, right? Again, no, because I left. I left because I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And it caused me to think a little differently about this industry I was working in, right? I don't know any idea what the chances of being diagnosed with type 1 while being the director of advanced technologies in an insulin pump company are, but astronomical. Made me think differently. Led to the founding of Companion. This thing is highly questionable. All right. So, quick primer on type 1 diabetes. It means your body doesn't produce insulin. You need insulin to convert the sugars in your body and your food to energy. If you don't do that, they build up, you get what's called acidotic, and ultimately you can die. So, short story, if you're type 1, give insulin before you die. But it's not that simple because if you give too much, it can also send you low, right? Which is another ambulance ride to the hospital and another risk of death, frankly. So it's about giving the right amount of insulin at the right time, which is a very hard thing to do. This is the way I think about it, or would be. Give up. All right, I think of it like a three-legged stool. Those three legs, in my mind, are control of your blood sugar, the top one, right? Keeping it in range, we say, or there's lots of metrics to this, hemoglobin A1C, or time in range, what have you. Doesn't really matter. Another leg is avoiding ambulance rides to the hospital. Nice. All right, there we go. Another one's avoiding ambulance rides to the hospital. And the third is easy burden, pain in the butt factor, whatever it is. How much work are you willing to put in to avoid those other two things? So I think the point is, though, that you really can't maximize all three of those things. You kind of have to place your bet on there, right? And there we go. Right, so I place my chips about here, right? What that means is I want the best control of my blood sugar I can get, consistent with never taking an ambulance ride to the hospital, and I personally don't care about how much work I put into it. I'm willing to put in a little more effort than some people are. My sister, who's type 1, would place a different bet. And actually, that's the realization, that of the 2 million odd people with type 1 diabetes in this country, everybody's experience of the disease is different. Okay, so we filed that away. And we started to think about all the ways there were to deliver insulin. Remember, I was working in an insulin pump company. We realized that there's hundreds of them, but they really only fell into a couple of categories. We had like legacy insulin pens, which are cheap and easy. They're really just glorified syringes. Dial how much insulin you want injected, that's it. Or smart insulin pumps. Smart insulin pumps are fantastic, right? They have automated algorithms. They give you the right amount of insulin when you need it, theoretically. But you have to wear them 24/7. They're costly. They're burdensome, right? So as great a job as these things do, only about 7% of people in the United States use insulin wear one. The remaining 93% are still using the cheap, easy legacy insulin pen technology. Well, that was interesting to us. So we said, okay, what about these other two boxes here? Well, one of them is the basic patch pumps. They've been tried commercially, not successful for obvious reasons, right? In many ways, the worst of both possible worlds. And then they didn't exist yet, but we thought over time, the smart insulin pen would prove to be the most broadly applicable of these 4 categories. We thought all 4 of these categories is right for some people, but again, it made sense that smart insulin pens would ultimately prove to be the most beneficial. So we developed this product, the InPen system. The InPen is just like a normal insulin pen, same size, same shape, same weight. You use it the exact same way, dial and dose. Works with all your insulins, has best-in-class accuracy. You don't have to recharge it or change the battery. In other words, you just use it like a normal pen. But it has a Bluetooth radio, sends everything you did over to your phone, right? And that means what we always said is that the pen is the enabling technology for the value we deliver through the app. Okay, what is that value? Well, this is the app. We obviously have a home screen, which is kind of like a snapshot of everything you're doing with your diabetes. We have an automatic logbook, which is your insulin, your glucose, your carbs, everything you've done. You can dive into it on a daily basis, either yourself or your doctor. We've got alerts, alarms, and reminders. These help you remember to take your insulin. They help you know if your insulin's degraded because it got too old or too hot. You know about all those things. We have integrated reports for your healthcare provider, so they know exactly how you've been doing. And I think the most important thing that we do is a dose calculator. Insulin pumps do this, and now smart insulin pens do this. I mentioned that it's all about taking the right amount of insulin at the right time, right? That's a very complex calculation that you have to do. Don't remember this or anything, but you have to take into account your recent doses, duration of insulin action, carbohydrates, carbohydrate factor, insulin sensitivity, blood glucose, target blood glucose, run all that through a 4th order polynomial, and out pops your recommended dose. Simple, right? All right, so smart insulin pumps do that for you. This does that for you. And that is why people get better when they use devices like this. That's what we added for 93% of people who use insulin. And that's all I want to talk about our product, because it's hopefully not the most important thing I can talk to you about today. I want to talk a little more about, the history, of course. So, all right, history of the company. Incorporated 2013. Raised just a little bit of money in 2014. Took us almost 10 months. For us, that was $495,000. That's a lot of money, but it's really not when you're trying to run a medical device company. But we used that $495 to develop an advanced prototype. On that, we raised our B round of funding. With that, we got a 510K clearance. Once we had that, we were able to launch just a couple of pens into the market in 2017, and kind of a beta launch to check it out. Later in the year, we did a limited market release, and then that led to our C round of funding, full market release in 2018, and then ultimately a C round of funding in 2019 that we did that. Once we had that, and it's big building time, hire a huge sales force, and you better go and produce a good sales ramp, which we did. So the whole idea was all of this was then going to lead to our D round of funding, but that never happened. Never happened because September 10th of last year, the company was acquired by Medtronic for an undisclosed amount of money, but you get the idea. So after, the point is, I guess, after ABD, after Dexcom, after Allure, after Tandem, this one worked. 5th time's the charm, right? But it didn't come easy, and that's, I think, more importantly what I wanted to talk about today. Some of those lessons learned. To me, those fell into just 2 categories: the kind of general lessons, thoughts on what the job is. Was it what I expected? The answer is absolutely not. Way better and way worse. And then some specific stories that I have that hopefully illustrate that there are going to be times that you're going to have to make decisions without a lot of data, shooting from the hip, not feeling confident in yourself. Get over it, right? That's the job. So what makes a good CEO or entrepreneur or founder? Really all the same thing, frankly. You probably know this stuff. You've probably learned about it in your classes. You can certainly search it on the internet. What I found in my own journey is that nobody ever told me how contradictory it all was, right? You know, they tell you you got to be confident, almost to a fault, right? We all know that. But you also have to be coachable. You have to learn from your mentors, your advisors. Right? You got to be, you got to believe in your vision. You're an innovator. The world's likely to tell you that you're completely wrong, right? You got to get used to that. You've got to know that you're right, but you also got to know when you're wrong, right? When it's time to pivot. All right. So you got to be an optimist. You've got to always know that this is going to work out. You're asking people to quit their jobs to come work for you. You're asking people to give their money to you so you can spend it. You got to know that you're going to be able to raise the next money, that you're going to be able to fix that bug, whatever it is, right? But you also have to be a realist. You got to know, that you're going to have to raise money earlier than you want. That you're going to have to take a lower valuation than you think you deserve. This stuff is going to go wrong. You got to be creative, right? Again, you're the innovator. You see things other people don't see. You see solutions, you see problems. Innovate. But innovate what's important to your company, whatever your product is, right? There are going to be things that you just should do the old tried and true way because it works, people are familiar with it, etc. And the problem is nobody's really going to tell you when you're doing too much of one or too much of the other. Or more accurately, I guess, everybody's going to tell you that. You can't necessarily believe them, though, right? It's like the first one with the world's going to tell you your innovation is stupid. You can't believe that. So how do you know when to believe people? I don't know. That's the challenge of the job. It's what you're going to have to figure out. And I wanted to say just one thing on the CEO job specifically. Most jobs, right? Your boss comes to you and says, hey, this is what I need you to get done. Here's your task list, whatever it is. It doesn't really happen with a CEO job. Now, that's easy because you're responsible for everything, right? We all accept that. The problem is that they don't give you the list, right? If you had a list of 150 things you could just check off and get done, it'd be easy. But you have to go figure out what to put on that list, right? So you need a business license in the city you operate in, pay your taxes in that city, not federal, not state, your city. I don't care if you make revenue, you still owe that tax. That's your responsibility. Insurance, directors and officers insurance, cybersecurity insurance, health insurance, workers' comp insurance, they're all your responsibility. Got a new building, cleaning crew, your responsibility. Coffee service, you. But, some of these things are going to be real obvious. If you don't have coffee, people yell on screen and get mad. But that business license thing I mentioned, I might have screwed that up. It's going to be a lot of those things. All right, so benefits of being CEO or founder, by the way. The first makes a lot of sense. You get paid the most amount of money, right? No, you don't. No. So as a founder, you're expected to suffer, right? This got worse. So like Peter Thiel's book, 0 to 1 a few years ago. I don't know, probably a lot of you have read it. And it actually makes sense. This is probably your first crack at, let's say, CEO, right? But you're expected to hire the best of the best people in the world at all of these different functions of your company, marketing, sales, engineering, whatever it is. They want to be paid market rates. But have you earned a market rate as CEO? This is your first time doing it. Not really. So no, you do not earn the most amount of money normally. But those people got to do what you say, right? That's great. Yeah, no, that's not really the way it works. You are not going to be the expert in every function. Again, engineering, sales, marketing, logistics, manufacturing, whatever it is. But you've employed those people. They're the best in the world. You need to let them tell you what needs to be done, right? And if that's happening, you've done something right. So, but you're in charge though, right? I'll give a sword into that. You are in charge, but my recommendation is to be very, very careful in how often you tell people that, It's better to lead through vision than through command, right? Again, these people working for you, they're the best in the world at what they do. It's better to let them do their jobs and get out of the way, right up until it's time to not, right? So you gotta think about that for a second. Here you are as somebody who's not the expert in marketing, sales, engineering, whatever it is, and you're forced to telling one of the world's experts that they're wrong. And you're gonna have to do it. Hopefully, very rarely, but it does happen. But no problem, because your advisors help with that stuff, right? Sort of again. So yeah, we'll try to. But you know your company better than we do. You know it better than anybody. Any advice you're gonna get from somebody like myself, any other advisor, is gonna be colored by our own experiences, our own companies, the things we dealt with. It might be applicable to you, it might not be. And that's your job, right? To figure out what did that advice take and what maybe you have to set aside to some extent. Another hard thing to do. But you are responsible, right? Yeah, that part's true. I'll give you that one. You're responsible for keeping the doors open, the lights on, paychecks coming. But here's the thing, from my perspective. All those challenges, they're the absolute best part of this job, right? When you're going through it, you start to realize how rare that is, how special it is, and when you get it done successfully, speaking for myself, there's never been a better sense of accomplishment in anything I've ever done than that. It made me realize that being an entrepreneur is not about being the expert in engineering or marketing or sales or whatever it is. It's about leading those best of the best people with a cohesive vision on where your company needs to go. So I said I'd give a few specific stories, and here they are. The first one, advisors. I mentioned that earlier. So I was going out for a round of funding and asked my advisors for advice. And they gave me great advice. Started with never raise money from angels. Never raise money from venture capitalists. Never raise money from private equity. Never raise venture debt. And never, but never take money from a strategic. Well, that's all the funding sources, right? That's it. You can't do anything. So it's your job, in this case it was my job, to figure out why each one of my advisors told me what they told me. What was it in their history that made them say that? How'd they get bit, right? Does that apply to my company? Can I protect myself from that? So in the end, speaking for myself and companion, we raised money from each and every one of those groups of people, and none of them was a mistake, but a few came close. Example of that, number two, strategics. So a strategic is a company that has a strategic interest in investing in your company rather than a financial one, right? They don't care about the money you're going to return them. They care about, the synergy of your product with theirs, or you blocking some competitor, who knows? But the point is, their goals and yours are not aligned, right? A lot of times that's fine. But when you're selling your company, you might need 98% shareholder approval. That's what I need. So anybody with 2% can block the deal. So I'm 3 hours from needing to get all the signatures, basically 100% of the shareholders, and I get this call. Basically said, from a strategic, said, well, we'll only approve the deal if you license us your technology. How does that work, right? Is my acquirer going to give me a bunch of money for something I've just given away for free? Not going to happen. So catch-22, didn't know what to do. Jump off the phone, call the lawyers, 3 hours later, $5,000 or $10,000 in legal bills, and I got to call this guy back. President of a very large company. Frankly, I had to threaten to sue him. I had to threaten to sue him for breach of an effective fiduciary duty that case law suggested maybe he had. Sounds like a bluff, right? Was it? Maybe, probably. I don't know. But I think the point was that moment was like the single scariest time in the whole deal, right? But it got done. So that story, I think, illustrates that your shareholders have a hell of a lot more leverage over you than you'd like to think. But there's another group that has leverage over you, and that's your acquirer. They know you want the deal, right? It's tremendous leverage. So one of my advisors told me that once you sign your letter of intent, this is the letter that agrees to sell the company, you've lost your very last argument. You've won your very last argument, excuse me. And I thought, that doesn't make any sense. I said, well, think about it. They're going to come in and say, okay, I need a 5-year non-compete agreement from you. And you're going to say, oh, no, I have a great argument for that. I've done the research. Here it is. 2 years is traditional. We're going to, compromise on traditional too, right? And they're going to say, no. You see, if you compete with us in 2 years, that's going to reduce the value of your company. So either we're going to walk away or maybe we're going to cut the deal value in half and you take the 5 years, right? I don't know if that's going to be the particular deal that you're dealing with or not, but that's how you lose those arguments. But what I want you to remember is that you have a hell of a lot more leverage than you think. They put a lot of effort into this deal. They want it. They put a lot of money in this deal. They want it. They're going to give you a lot of money. They want it. All right. So how'd that impact me? Well, the acquirer showed up on our doorstep one day, 8 people. Not kidding. Dragged me into a conference room, me, during COVID. 8 people from the biggest medical device manufacturer in the world, and me. And they informed me, they didn't ask me, they informed me they're going to be pushing the deal out 2 months because they canceled a board meeting. Okay, well, that increases risk. They could sour on the deal, they could find something they don't like, they could decide to pivot. I could run out of money, and I was running out of money. Doesn't sound good. So I said, no. They're like, well, what do you mean no? And all 8 faces are like, sorry, what? Well, if you're not going to meet the dates, then I'm going to shop the deal. I'm going to offer this company to other companies. And they said, oh, no, you can't do that. We have exclusivity. See, it says right here. And I had to say, no, read it again. It says you have exclusivity as long as we're meaningfully working toward a deal. But you're sliding it 2 months. It sounds to me like you're not. I'm going to shop the deal. Well, they wanted it, right? They called a special board meeting. We got it approved, right? So I think the point of that one is, was I risking blowing up a whole deal for a 2-month slip? Yeah, of course I was. Was that the right thing to do? I have absolutely no idea. I only know that it worked. So in the end, yeah, Companion Medical was a great success. We developed a new category of product. We got it out to tens of thousands of people, maybe 100,000 now, I don't know, growing every day. But meaningful exit for all of our shareholders, meaningful exit for all of our employees. Actually, I want to mention that I personally believe that in a startup company, all the employees should have meaningful equity. What does that mean? Well, it's different for everybody, right? But in an exit, it should mean that it matters to them. In our case, it did. So, hopefully one of these stories that resonates with some of you in some way. I try to share kind of some of more of the negatives than the positives because there's more of them. But I'll tell you what, the positives, they make it all worth it. So really looking forward to Q&A now, and hopefully we have a good, robust discussion. Thanks very much. Oh, did I? I don't think it's very important. Can I leave this on for a minute? I want to go back to the timeline. Timeline, sure. All right. Okay.
All right. So how much time do we have?
Timeline.
Oh, shoot. Okay. I'm gonna be asking some questions. If we don't have too much time, so if any of you have questions, please feel free, shout it out, and then we'll integrate in the conversation. Yes, please.
Hi. Could you give us some advice about how did you choose your advisor?
Ooh, anybody who would advise me? That maybe sounds silly, but I'm kind of serious. There's a bunch of trite sayings like never stop talking or always be selling or what have you, and I think that's true. But you're not always selling, but you're always learning, right? Talk to anybody every moment, all you can, and take advice. But be careful what advice you take. It's a hard problem, but I think if you get under the surface of the advice and ask why, it helps. It becomes more clear. But yeah, I don't have a great answer because it's everybody who would help me.
So we started first startup, and then that ran for about 2 years. Didn't work out. We pivoted, and we came back a while later. I read that you were hiring people then as well, and you're talking about hiring experts in the field. So I was curious, like, how did your hiring process change in your approach from the first startup? What were some things you learned from the type of people you want on your team? And then, especially in the MedTech field where it's very specialized, how did that change for Companion?
So that's actually a really good question. In my first startup, Allure, we hired a lot of very junior people. We did not hire the best of the best in every area. We had a few. Now, in that particular case, that wasn't what was death to the company. Death to that company was that the product worked in certain people's hands. And that was the problem. You can't really have something that works, half the time, it was all the time for that position, and that position can't even figure out how to use it. So that was the death there. But yeah, it was a lot harder than it needed to be because we hired more junior people. You need them, right? And they can be extraordinarily good. But with Companion, we hired some people with a little more experience. So sorry for this class, but you obviously need a mix.
So fast forward to Companion, I guess. I mean, you had like engineering lead positions for quite a number of years. Were you pulling, I guess, like your connections from those companies, or where were you finding those new team members to support something like a MedTech company?
Yeah, I mean, for a while, it was people that we knew, and that paid us huge dividends. It was also a tremendous mistake. Certain people you work with, they may be your friend, they may even be extraordinarily smart, but they may not be right for the job you're hiring them for. Yeah, I don't know. Hiring is, I think, the hardest thing. And that's why everybody will tell you, building the team is key. That's because it's the hardest part.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, a lot of it was probably simplified because you already had so much experience in MedTech already, so that probably made it a lot easier for you.
Yeah, I mean, we had a big network in MedTech. I mean, interviewing is a skill you learn, obviously. There's some people better at it than others. I don't know if I'm very good.
Doing great.
Interviewing people, though. I'm not sure if I'd hire you yet or not. I'll tell you in 10 minutes.
Can we cut that part out?
No, the other one, though, is, if you've been in the industry, though, that's almost can be a problem, right? Because you may very well have a non-solicit, right? You can't actually hire people out of your previous company. And that's a tremendous challenge.
So I guess, room full of college students, right? Interested in MedTech, trying to start a company. Probably a lot of them don't have a decade of mechanical engineering expertise under the belt. How do you suppose they would go about, exploring the MedTech field?
Well, dive right in. But there's one talent or one skill or one personality trait over absolutely everything else that all employers value. And at the end of the day, I don't know how controversial this is. It's just the ability to go and do stuff. When somebody raises their hand and says, I don't know how to do that, or that's not my job, or can you send me to school for that, or whatever, you're like, can you please just dive in and try it? Right? That's the skill set that really, I think, in my opinion, differentiates truly successful people from not. And the little bit of time I've spent here with the CIE and whatnot, that's what I've seen is people just like ready to absolutely make everything their job. And when you're going to do that, you're going to excel at whatever you do. There's just no way around it.
Again, if there are any questions, please feel free to shout out. I'm just going to keep going. Yeah.
Softball.
Yeah. How many customers did you talk to before you started developing the product? What did you ask them? And what did you learn after you learned what the product was?
So that's a really hard one for me, and I don't know if my advice is any good. We were doing something that, as I tried to explain, it's a combination of two therapies.
Hey, Sean, can you repeat the question so that?
Oh, yeah,
everybody
sure.
can- yeah.
How many customers did we talk to? Did that pivot us, that sort of thing? Like market research, basically, right? And the real answer was, if I'm being honest, not a whole lot. We kind of understood, and I'm actually dealing with this now in a new company that we started a few months ago. It sounds egomaniacal, and I suppose it probably is, but we just knew that what we were trying to do was important. We also knew that people hadn't seen it before, and we didn't think gonna have a lot of luck in explaining it to people. When I went out and I said, hey, smart pens, people interested in smart pens, the first answer I got was, what the hell is that? Okay, so I tried to explain it a little bit. And I said, well, smart pens though, right? And they said, well, no, I don't want that. And and I mentioned that today, right? People are gonna tell you you're stupid. That was like the scariest time of companion for me because the whole world was telling me they didn't want it. So then I had to dig in more and say, what don't you want? And I realized that when I said smart pen, they had this vision of this thing that was about that big, and like a screen and like a keyboard, and you plugged it in, maybe a pull start, I don't know, it's like super complicated thing, right? They didn't see that, right? So I started to realize that, like, okay, no, we're gonna stay the course, we built the thing, and then I was able to go out and hand it to people and say, what about that though? You know, and it wasn't just a model, they were able to use it, use the app. Oh yeah, that, I'm interested in that. And then it was like another year, and everybody was like, okay, so where is it, Chief? You know, you've been telling us about it for 4 years. You know, and then eventually you get to a point where you can actually deliver on this promise you've been making. But, you know, you always have to check with your customers, obviously, but you just, man, gotta be careful to ask the right question, you know? And I'm no expert in this, but I obsess over market research, but not always just doing it is not the right answer. It's doing it and doing it right. John.
Thanks, Sean. You solved a problem that you had personal experience with. How important was that to your success? And if you were an entrepreneur and didn't have a personal experience with the problem you're trying to solve, how far away from a personal experience would you allow it to be before you'd say, I just don't know?
That's a great question. So if everybody heard that, he said, you know, how important was my personal experience in developing a companion? Well, I think that, you know, I tried to walk you through the fact that my own diagnosis of type 1 diabetes was kind of the genesis of me doing this. But why is that? Is it because I learned something about diabetes I didn't know? No, I knew everything about the disease. It's really embarrassing. It's because it sort of engaged that empathy muscle that I hadn't been using before. To just ask myself, what is this like for other people, which I tried to share. InPen is not the perfect product for me. I didn't design the thing I needed. What I tried to do is ask myself, and I had the benefit, to your point, of having been in the industry a decade at that point, of kind of thinking through every story that I'd heard over a decade and saying, okay, what's the product that's most interesting to the most people, like I said, most broadly applicable of the 4 categories that I talked about. So for me, it was critical, the diagnosis, but only because it told me to do something I should have been doing anyway, which is, I guess, the embarrassing part.
So it was an inspiration, but not necessarily a critical body of knowledge that you couldn't overcome.
It was definitely not a body of knowledge. It was just a kick in the pants that I needed myself, embarrassingly. I think it's probably not a great idea to get involved in something that you know absolutely nothing about. But you know, if you're interested in it, you probably know something about it, or you've been doing some research and now you do know something. I don't think at all that you need to be an expert in that field. I mean, I happen to have had a lot of diabetes experience, but that was not, I think, at all necessary for our success at Companion, I think.
So how has the buildup of your startup helped you identify like new problems in medtech? Like essentially what I'm trying to ask is like, what's next?
Yeah, that's a great question. So what's next and how did this change the way I live? It's funny because again, before I guess my diagnosis, embarrassingly, I never really saw problems. It's just like, just doing my job, that's fine. And again, that's pretty silly to admit. And I'm thrilled to death that all you guys are thinking about this now, because it took me a decade after I graduated, right, to start thinking about being an entrepreneur myself, which means thinking about problems, thinking about solutions, asking yourself these things. And now I see them everywhere, right? I mean, that chair is designed wrong. You know, it just like everything is. And so what's next for me is a stealth startup company that I started with a buddy of mine. So this is the smart insulin pen world, right? There's my product that launched 3 years ago. There's his product that launched 6 weeks ago, or maybe 2 months ago. And so the two of us, I think, together feel somewhat justifiably so that we created that industry. He's a friend of mine. We were talking at night, you know, drinking too many margaritas, and just realized there was one notable hole that I didn't describe up here that was still just completely empty. So a few months ago, we started another company. It's called Luna Diabetes, stealth though. And yeah, it's the only company attempting to solve that particular problem, and we know we can do it. So that's how, and that's diabetes. Then there's actually something outside of diabetes, because diabetes is great, I know it, but I don't need to be. It doesn't need to be the only thing I do for the rest of my life either. Yeah.
From going from the lower to the current startup that you just did, how was like the pivot in between, and how were you able to pick yourself back up after like failing once to go like to try again?
Strong
like,
word.
What did you like?
learning once.
And like, what did you like learn from it? And like,
No, we did. We failed. We totally failed. Well, I mean, it didn't originally, right? I mean, I went from that back to a normal startup world. But actually, I'm not trying to make light of it. I actually don't really think we failed, and I'll explain why. In my opinion, startup companies they're problems, but they're solutions to problems that you don't know if they work, right? You may not even know if it's a real problem. And the idea is put a little bit of money behind a possible solution to a problem and try it out. Now, we did that. We spent almost no money. In fact, I want to say with that company, we spent like just over $1 million getting a 510K in a product and doing a clinical trial. It was pretty cheap in the medical device space. And we found out that it was a dumb idea. But we found that out on $1 million, not $100 million. So, and then we decided, let's not do this anymore. Too often we see good money after bad, like, okay, that didn't work, we gotta pivot the company. Like somehow or another, the company itself has to survive. I just don't think that's true, right? The company was a bad idea, fine, let it die. Come up with a good one. So we failed, but we failed quickly and cheaply and moved on to something that worked. So I never really looked at it as a huge negative, frankly. I don't know, maybe that's that optimistic part. I don't know, maybe I should have been a realist. Is that what you were asking?
yeah, and like just like tips that you have for like starting like a new like business, and also how did you pay out the people that like initially funded awards?
Yeah. So how do you pay out the initial funders?
Yeah.
It's going to be pretty contractual, right? When they invest in your company, hopefully they didn't just give you a few bucks and have you just tell them I'll give you something back later. It's going to be contractual. So I mean I could talk for 4 hours on the details of traditional deal terms and everything else, but obviously the people who put money in earlier, they take the most risk and they're going to tend to get the highest return. But interestingly, the people who put in money later have more power, right? They're like, well, I'm giving you my money now, so I'm going to tell you when you sell. Let's say you've raised, it's a medical device company, so it's millions of dollars, right? You've raised $10 million, and you're going to sell for $8 million. Well, the last people to put money in, they want their money back first, and they can ask for it because they have the power. The company can't continue without their money. But the first people to put money in this case, they might not get anything. But if the company sold for $100 million, they're going to make by far the most. So, like I said, I can talk about that for hours and happy to, but yeah. Oh, yes.
Done in the back.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, it seems like you alluded to quite a few challenges that you faced in your career, and I'm wondering maybe what some of the personal skill sets that you've developed over the years to kind of overcome those challenges, maybe what those skills are.
Challenges, that's all the failure we talked about earlier?
Exactly.
Right, okay, I'm clear. Yeah, I mean, I think that certainly there's this, an optimistic mindset that's obviously important, but like I said, to me, I don't know, maybe it's me lying to myself, but I don't look at my career as having a ton of failure per se. I look at a ton of stupidity, right? I mean, like that Dexcom thing when I sold all my stock at $1, it's worth 530 now. That was stupid. But I couldn't have known it was going to do that, right? It was a little unlucky maybe. At the time, in fact, the company had like 2 months of money in the bank. It was definitely going under. Now it happened. But yeah, I don't know. I guess I don't have a great answer to that. Maybe I'm just really good at lying to myself, and every single thing I ever did was like, okay, either success or learning experience or something else. But it's not like I really remember a lot of days of my career where I came down, laying on the couch and went, such a failure. Although maybe I probably was a couple of times. but maybe.
So you've talked a little bit about the Medtronic acquisition. What was due diligence like?
Oh, brutal. All right. So due diligence is where they get to come in and ask you anything. And it turns out everything. So we had a meeting. This was immediately after the start of COVID, so it was on Zoom. And at the end of the meeting, they said, what you guys have is really interesting. We'd like to get into your data room. We'll send you names. So the data rooms are electronic things where you put all the important documents to your company, right? And they sent us 84 names to get into the data room on day one. That list got up to 130. We had 100 people in the company. That included 35 in manufacturing, 33 in the field. We had maybe 30 professional employees. And that might have included customer service. I mean, we had like, I don't know, we had like 4 or 5 people working on the acquisition with 130 people asking us every question we could possibly think of. It sucked. But if you've done your work ahead of time, you know, you've got all your corporate documents clean, you've got some kind of a plan for everything. You don't need to have everything, right? I didn't have a Medtronic level sales and marketing plan, but I had something I could show them. I didn't need to have a Medtronic level cost of goods sold, you know, cost reduction plan, but I had something I could show them. It was like 2 slides. That particular one, I remember we had a graph, okay, it costs $120 to build a pen, and then we're going to implement some injection mold thing, it's going to be 110, and then we're going to, you know, and it was like 10 or 12 different things, and, you know, estimates on where the pen was going to get to. There's a plan for it. It was 1 slide. But we probably had to make that slide, you know, when they asked for it. So yeah, that was a tough part. But if you've done your work ahead of time, I don't think it's really that big a deal. It's not insurmountable. And then, you know, frankly, a lot of times you can say, yeah, we don't know, right? I mean, I felt during the process that if I didn't have an answer, then they would say, oh, you know, and they'd walk away. Again, getting back that leverage thing, that's not true. You know, there was plenty of things I didn't answer to their, to their, whatever they weren't happy with, but they bought it anyway. Was that what you were getting at, Jim?
Are we at time? Are we at
Are
time?
there any other questions?
Good idea, question. I can keep going. I just want to.
I can keep going. Feel free to walk out if you need to. What's the question?
Yeah, I guess mine just kind of, I like to think that quotes carry like a lot of power. So, you know, is there a quote that you live by throughout your journey, or even a quote you live by today?
You know, I'm really, really bad at that. I'll read a quote and think, I gotta remember that one. That is incredible. It is really powerful. And then I forget it the next second. So if you were to give me like 10, I'd pick my 2 favorite, but no. Something else?
Oh, come on. I saw that first.
Okay, that one right.
Yeah, so how do you motivate your team when they lose faith? Let's say, for example, you don't meet your sales goal for the quarter and they all down and, you know, they don't feel like working anymore. What do you do then as a CEO?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I don't have a silver bullet here, except to say that, you know, I think you have to be realistic now and honest. Now, there's a level of honesty that maybe you don't need to be. I've worked with people who like to have a big company meeting and go, all right, so everybody knows we've got 8 days of money in the bank, okay? Next Thursday, I had 8 days of money in the bank. I did in May of 2015. I didn't tell anybody that. Now, you could say that was inappropriate. You could say I should have warned everybody. Maybe that's true. I don't know. Again, I only know what I did. But in that particular case, I didn't figure that honesty was the best policy. That being said, I think, you know, you have a down quarter. Okay, we had a down quarter. Guys, not shocking. We're doing something brand new here. Nobody knows how to do this. Nobody knows how to launch an InPen or sell a smart pen. So clearly, neither do we. Do we all believe that this is really an important product? Yes, we all believe that. Okay, so what are we doing wrong? Let's go figure it out. All right, you guys, you're going to go talk to our customers and you're going to tell them about the dose calculator, which is a patient-centric feature. But you guys, you're going to go tell them about the report that's for them. And we're going to see whether or not doctors care about their own time or their patient's well-being. Let's go. Turns out they care about themselves. But you know what I mean? And it's like, just provide a path, provide a vision, accept that we're not doing what we want to be doing, but here's what we're gonna do about it. But you better damn well have a plan, because if it's like, yeah, guys, this sucks, I don't know. You know, that's not much of a vision to follow. And by the way, plan could be wrong. It probably will be. So what, right? Go, learn, do, and then come back and change it if it's wrong. You'll be smarter the next time. I'm sorry, there's a question over here.
I was wondering, the affordability of your plan, like, how does that take into account of like funding, making it more available to people that may not?
Yeah. It was huge. So, you know, it's a medical device, right? It's not cheap, but we took responsibility, which I think is rare, as a medical device company for making it affordable. We basically said, look, it's our job to go get insurance coverage for this thing. If we do, great, then we win. If we don't, it's not your fault. It's not your problem. So we put together a, copay assistance thing that was totally transparent to everybody. So when you go to the pharmacy to get an InPen, you're going to hear no more than $35, period. Right? It costs a lot more than that, but that's what you're going to hear. You have no idea if it's because your insurance covered it or because I covered it. Doesn't matter to you, right? You only know that you can afford it. $35 per year. The smart pumps I was talking about, we're talking about averaging like $1,000 a year, and they can be more than that. So yeah, it's extraordinarily affordable, and that was our problem. Now, years later, we have great insurance coverage, but we still make sure that nobody pays more than $35. That was, if I may quickly, that was at least as big a deal for the doctors as it was to the patients. Turns out, patient goes down to the pharmacy, says, I want an InPen. Pharmacist tells them what it really costs. Say, holy shit. Go back to the doctor and yell at him, right? Doctors don't like to be yelled at. So they stop writing InPen. We had to go and tell them, no, doc, it's never going to happen. Everybody, it's affordable for everybody, right? We take responsibility for that. They're not going to yell at you anymore. And it wasn't until we had at one point, we had like 80% coverage. So 1 in 5 people is yelling at their doctor. Way too many, right? It wasn't until we took it to like 100% what looked like coverage that we really took off. That was actually a critical thing.
Did you make sure that when you were getting bought over by name, thank you, Medtronic, did you make sure to keep it in the contract to have 100% coverage so that people would still only pay $35? Or is that a possible thing for Medtronic to actually jack the prices?
Were you in this deal? So we did the best job we could. And on day one, they shut off about 20 to 30% of the country, just turn them off. And on day 2, sales went to crap. And on day 3, which was actually like 6 months in, they finally heard us how important that was. And we turned it back on. And things get better. The rest of the $35, doesn't matter. There's about 3 different plans that got everybody covered at that level. They shut one of them off. That was enough. It's just, we learned it the first time when we put it in place, and we learned it again when we turned it off. I know it's safe. We told them, the big companies are interesting, right? Because they really do have like the best and the best people of absolutely everything in the world. But my opinion, what a big company, at least Medtronic, does badly is things they do badly. And that sounds stupid. I'll explain. At a startup company, you need somebody to go figure out reimbursement. You say, you go figure out reimbursement. Okay, you go do it. But at a big company, you say, okay, we need to figure out reimbursement. And they say, well, I don't know how to do that. And so they say, well, hire somebody. So they write a job description for a job they don't know how to do. They put it out there, and they find the guy or the person, comes in, and says, okay, figure out reimbursement. The person says, all right, this is not actually exactly what I do, but I do know about it. And then they write a job description for a person that they actually know. And then you promote them to director, and they hire somebody, and they come in, and then they do the job. And after about a year and a half, we're making progress. Stupid, but it's not every big company, obviously, but that's my experience. I like startups better. What else we got?
So just given the nature of the product and the American healthcare system, it's obviously, there's a lot of ethics issues in starting up a company like this. I was just curious as to how these ethical issues, like raise barriers to entry or just to get your startup started in general?
Yeah, wow. I'd probably talk about that for days. There's a million of those sorts of issues, right? I mean, especially in healthcare, from safety to health equity, all kinds of arguments. Speaking on safety for a second, this is hard to like say out loud because it sounds good. Simple fact is, startup companies will take risks, larger companies won't. Why will we take those risks? Because on balance, right, if you did a benefit risk analysis, there's benefit to the product. There may be risk, but overall there's benefit. And if that ratio is positive, maybe you should be doing it. But plenty of larger companies will just say, we do not accept risk, period. Well, there's risk in having diabetes, right? Every injection of insulin I take, I risk sending myself to the hospital, every one. If I don't take it, I guarantee sending myself to the hospital. The risk is there. So, is there a risk that our bolus calculator is wrong? Yes, but is that a greater risk than not having access to any bolus calculation at all? No. So, that's an interesting ethical dilemma of, you could say in some ways you're adding a risk of a bad bolus calculation, but as opposed to no bolus calculation whatsoever, is that really an added risk? So it's a matter of perspective as well. And then you get into, like I said, health equity and whatnot, and that comes back to that $35. I figured our responsibility that everybody can afford this. And by the way, was $35 the right number? I don't know. I mean, should it have been 5 or 0? Maybe, but it wasn't 1,000, and we took that really seriously.
Just a quick follow-up. Have you sold any of your products outside the United States so far?
No, we're cleared in Europe, but we haven't. Launching before the end of the year, actually. So that's one reason we were really excited about Medtronic is that, small companies are great at developing products. Big companies are great at marketing and selling them. So we're really excited to, we had 30 people in the field. They have 300 people in the field, just in the US, right? We had US, they have the entire world. So this is the way to get a product truly global. I don't know anything about Europe. I was not the guy to launch a product in Europe. So could have found the person, I suppose. Yeah, exactly. Definitely would have had to do it. I was going to feel miserably.
Are you still involved with your company even though you feel like Medtronic?
Remember all my answers? Sorta. Yeah, sorta. I don't work there anymore. I left as a full-time employee about 3 months ago. I stayed a lot longer than I ever expected to. Lots of reasons for that, but probably my own mistakes being the biggest one. But I am still involved. Last week, they had a big healthcare provider, presentation, whatever, down in San Diego, and I came in and gave the, kind of dog and pony like this about what it is and why it is and all that kind of stuff, and talked to all the healthcare providers and like that. They sure as hell don't call me and ask me for an opinion, I'll tell you that. They're quite happy to have mine out of there. But it's another story there. There's 100 stories I can tell. Normally with an acquisition, on day one of two things happen. The CEO is going to get either booted out the door, they cut the head off the snake because they want their own culture, not your culture, or you get like a 2-year retention agreement, right? Stay for 2 years, we'll pay some extra money. In my case, I got neither. And so I called them up and I was trying to figure this out. I'm like, oh, happy to have you. Okay, but a retention agreement, right? No, but happy to have you though. So I start to think, okay, the guys with the boxes are going to show up in a minute. I'm like packing up my desk, but no, they apparently really wanted me there. But I had no direct reports. I was in meetings, but I wasn't responsible for anything. It took a while to sort of realize that, frankly, there was something a little nefarious going on. And in my particular case, when I left, about, 15 or 20 people got retention packages. So the real reason on that one was, if I'm there, they felt like people would stay and follow me, but if I leave, then they got to keep them another way. So my salary was cheaper than a bunch of retention packages. Okay, but too bad it took me 10 months to figure that one out.
You mentioned that hiring is really hard and interviewing is a skill. From both sides of the table, what's your advice when you're a founder trying to bring people in and when you're a student on new grad trying to walk in a startup?
The most important thing, and I'm going to kind of modify one of my answers from earlier, because I said experience was one important difference between a lure and companion. But reflect on it a little bit, that was true. Experience, the people I hired were different experience. But the real difference was, the thing I said was most important, is the people who were like willing to dive in and get it done versus the people who were just like, I work here, And the people we hired at Allure, were they really bought into what we were doing? Were they really following my vision? Were they really, going to have a meaningful exit if we did? Probably no, no, and no. Whereas a companion, absolutely that was the case, right? We hired people who truly wanted to solve that problem. And then we made it worth their while, hopefully. And I spent a lot of, when you give equity, different question than you asked. When you give equity, you're going to go, okay, we're going to give you 10,000 shares. And people usually go, oh, that's great. Nobody ever asks, what could 10,000 shares be worth? What percentage of the company is 10,000 shares? How do I value my 10,000 shares? They really ought to be asking that question, and all of you ought to ask that question if you're presented that situation yourselves. And so usually in the past, when I'd been presented with, going to give somebody 10,000 shares or whatever it was, they'd say, oh, thank you. It's like, great, they didn't ask. And then I realized that was a bad thing, right? I mean, if somebody doesn't ask, they don't care. You need to make them care, right? You say, oh, do you know what this is? Let's talk about what this company could be. Get up on the whiteboard, right? Here's what we could be worth. We're going to sell this much. Here's the market. We're going to be worth this. And then your 10,000 shares is going to be worth as much as blank money. And you go, holy smokes, I am in, right? And it's not, I think, of different opinions on this. I don't think it's necessarily a bad idea to talk about kind of where stock is worth at times, because you can kind of, whoa, I have, even if it's private, like, I have a lot of money in this. I could be leaving. Like, I got to make this work. So I spent a lot of time selling to the employees as well as others. I have no idea if that even came close to answering your question, but
Good advice, anyone.
something. Yes.
Do you feel like you had a true competitive advantage in the early days? Was it the patents or the proprietary technology?
No. The question was, did we have a real competitive advantage in the early days? So when me and my co-founder, we set out to do this, the original idea was, we came up with the fact that, and we didn't invent smart pens, right? I mean, we may have done the first one, but the idea was out there. We said it's a great idea, actually. Somebody needs to do that. So the original idea, at least from my perspective, was, okay, I'm gonna go get a job with the people making smart pens. And I looked around and I couldn't find them. Okay, well, they're there, I just can't find them. So then we thought, okay, but there's somebody making this product, and it's going to become successful, and then some other company is going to say, oh, geez, that's a great idea. We need one. We got to catch up. And they're going to be ready to buy one. And so that's what we'll do. The first iteration of the company was like a project more than a product, right? We wanted a stack of drawings, and then we got our stack of drawings. Okay, well, nobody's buying. We'll get a 510K clearance. And then, okay, nobody's buying. We'll sell it. And we probably shouldn't have done that. We probably should have just had a vision of taking the company big from the start, which we didn't. But I think the point was, to answer your question, the whole time, we were convinced we were in second place or third place. We just didn't know who was beating us. We didn't really have any particular intellectual property advantage. We probably still don't today. But interestingly, here we are years later, and we founded the company in 2013, right? The product was pretty architected by like Christmas. And there's now 2 companies on the market. Ours, we believe, is vastly better than the other one. There's 5 or 6 or 7 companies chasing us along. Ours is way better than any of those. So our competitive advantage ended up being a better product, yes, but speed, right? I mean, to be able to do, in effect, I'll say more in just way, way, way less time. That was the superpower. There's a lot of ways you can go fast. I think that's, if there's a massive superpower you guys in this room have, it's that. Because you don't know about all the shit you're supposed to do. So you just don't do it, right? we had a kind of saying within the company, which was whenever we saw somebody moving quickly, we would say, we should find out what they're not doing so we can not do it too. And it sounds like a little bit irreverent, but there really is just a ton of worthless crap that goes on in companies that doesn't need to be done. So don't do it. Do the stuff that truly needs to be done. Do the requirements, fulfill all the requirements of an FDA clearance or what have you. But don't make up new stuff to do just so you think it'd be cool.
Yeah.
You know?
Follow-up question. How does where you're at right now in your career compare to your aspirations and expectations for yourself in college?
In college, I could never have seen what I'm doing now. I tried to hit on that a little bit. I really did not know what an entrepreneur was or how to ever do that. I remember having a conversation with a couple of friends about 5 years after I graduated. And we all agreed that the highest evolution of our careers was going to be VP of R&D. That was it, at a big company. That was what we were all striving for, is what we wanted to do. The only reason I ended up as, going back to Companion, I tried to get a job at a company doing smart pens, right? It ended up being like, well, geez, no, there isn't one, or I can't find it. If you want to work on this, you're going to have to do it yourself. So it categorically different from probably the path you all will follow. And I hope that's true, right? I mean, I wish I'd have figured this out 10 years before, but I didn't. So I never could have seen this. To me, right about this time in my career, hopefully about getting ready to be promoted to VP of R&D and, doing my 8 to 5 job, and, that's just it. But it turned out a little different than that. For better and worse, by the way. What else we got?
Who picked the right co-founders for a company? Like, in personal experience, how did you get the people to support you through these investments and these creations?
We had 4 co-founders. One of them was at the company the entire time, me. We had myself and my original co-founder, the 2 of us. We put in a couple of months. We hadn't even incorporated yet. He got promoted at work, got a big stock option award, just couldn't come on board full time. So we wrote him an advisor deal. 4 years later, when it actually looked like we might do something, he quit and came over at that point. Ended up being the best hire I ever made in my life. So he couldn't do it, so we got another co-founder. And he was great at that early stage, right? Really moved us quickly. But to be fair, we were having trouble pushing it over the finish line a few years later. And that's when the other guy came back, and they were together for a while, and he left. 4 months after we were officially founded, I hired a CFO because I thought that, who the heck's gonna give a bunch of money to, these jerk off kids who have never done it before, right? We need a gray hair in the room. Maybe not. Turns out, your vision as founders and as entrepreneurs is so much more important than that. We never needed to hire that guy. He was fine. We just didn't need him, and there was some friction, so we parted ways with him. So yeah, but how did I pick him? I don't know. I mean, me and the original co-founder, we jokingly say we came up with the idea for the company sitting around a campfire. Different reasons. I gave you my reasons tonight. He would have told you a completely different story. His story is true from his perspective. He was working at Dexcom, that other company I mentioned, doing glucose monitoring, and he was trying to figure out how to get more people to use glucose monitors, not pens. He said, well, if we had a pen, that would really be synergistic to this, and that would help push out glucose monitoring. Completely different reason, right? But that's just who was there. I don't have a great, if you were to say, hey, I have an idea, I need to go find a co-founder, I don't have a lot of advice for that. I did it too, and it worked okay. My kind of second co-founder that ended up leaving. Maybe I'll say, find somebody as dedicated to it as you are. Good luck. I'll try.
So were you looking for someone that completes you, that has some strengths where you have weaknesses?
Did you just quote Jerry Maguire? Yeah, but I was wrong. So my co-founder, Mike, is an electrical engineer and computer scientist. I'm a mechanical engineer. We thought that, man, together the 2 of us have the abilities to really build this. Well, during the entire 8 years of the company, I did like basically zero mechanical engineering. He did end up doing a bunch of computer science stuff, but it was years later. The job just wasn't what I expected, right? Running the company, raising money for the company, forming the team ended up being completely all-consuming. I didn't have the time to do the engineering that I thought I would, and probably were better for it, frankly. Turns out I have other skill sets. I don't know. So yeah, I think that's important. I mean, you don't want two people to do the exact same thing, right? Too often, I was in a meeting today with this other company, and there was, I don't know, there was 6 people in this meeting, and probably 4 of them didn't need to be there, and everybody's opining on the same thing. It's like, ugh, this is horribly inefficient. Like, you do your thing, they do their thing, and get it done. You know, if you're all doing the same thing all the time, you're moving at the speed of one person. So yeah.
In the early stages of your company, how did you balance your time between your startup and like your actual job?
My actual job?
Yeah, were you?
Oh no, I was 100%. Oh, well, that's not 100% true. So, left Tandem, and what I say is I was basically working full-time on the startup, and then I was consulting sort of on the side at that point to kind of keep food on the table. And, you know, we didn't have any money, right? I wasn't getting a salary from it, so I was, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I kind of told myself how much money I needed and how much consulting I had to do. I was extremely lucky to be able to get a consulting gig that would basically give me as much or as little work as I wanted. And it was, I think it was 2 days a week that I decided on. And I was doing that 2 days a week, and I was working on Companion 5 days a week. If you're wondering about the rest of that equation, like, you know, home life, yeah, negative. Just for me, it wasn't part of the deal. She's kicking me off the stage.
You just said your home life was nothing.
Well, it was non-existent for a while. What do you want me to say?
I don't want
to never turn it off,
to
right?
We're happy to stay and keep talking if you are, or if you're.
I think there was one last question.
Okay, great.
Yeah,
Take this last
just
one.
for entrepreneurs with like multiple ideas, do you recommend just going all in on one idea or trying different ideas maybe with one vehicle?
I recommend reading a book called Addicts and Millionaires by a very ADHD guy that has multiple ideas. And what he would say is, you know, you got an idea, great, do it. 2 ideas, great, do it. 3, maybe. 4, 5, 6, negative. You know, so I don't know. I mean, that's what I'm trying to do right now. You know, during Companion, I could not have done that. I mean, you know, flipping Elon Musk as the CEO of 2 huge companies, right? Negative. I don't know how that's even possible. But I didn't have any free time when I was the early days of CEO of Companion. But now I'm doing a different role, right? I'm on boards and whatnot. And I will take another CEO role, but I'm not doing it today. So as a founder, what I find now is that I can, you know, I've got a CEO of that company, and I'll have one of the next one. And the real bits that only I can do, or that maybe my perspective is super important on, that's what I'm trying to do, just that, right? And all that directors and officers insurance and coffee and cleaning crews that we talked about earlier, somebody else do that. It's super important, it has to be done, you know, and early startup, that's, you know, but I don't know that you could do all of that at 3 different companies. That sounds extraordinarily overwhelming to me. And by the way, I may fail at at doing this, you know, several company thing. I don't know, but it will be a learning experience.
All right. Well, Sean, say it, everyone.